Hi, and welcome to you all from my living room. I guess you guys are also in your living rooms. Most of you are. René, we just heard Mr. Samson talk about the idea of this new Green Deal and sustainable finance. What do you think of his ambitions?
Sustainable investment, to me, is investing in the right things. Things that will have legs to stand on going forward. And in that respect, the ambitions are right spot on, with a big task ahead of us all to make it all work.
Yeah, Elizabeth, ambitions are nice, but then of course the next question is, how realistic are they? He's speaking of a carbon neutral continent in 2050. That seems very, very ambitious.
It is the first time in 20 years, probably the last 2 years is the first time in 20 years that I've seen some real momentum in this space, and some people really coming together to identify what are the opportunities, how do we get there, how do we define them first, then how do we get there, and how do we make sure that we work together on this. For many of those 20 years, we made very little progress at all as an industry and as a global community, actually, and we wasted a lot of really precious time addressing these challenges and big questions. Yeah. What I am excited about is the recognition that the financial sector is so critical here, and the fact that everybody seems to be really focused on it now.
You say you see a lot of ambitions here, then you mean Europe. You're in a global firm. You see a big difference between Europe and let's say the United States, where you are now.
So I see the questions that come in from the Europeans as well as Asia and the Americas as well. And I would say that there is definitely a growing recognition around the world that ESG topics are critical and that asset managers like KKR need to manage them. I have certainly seen a significant growth in expectations from the European fund investors that we have. However, as a global organization, that affects every single one of our funds, whether we're investing in Asia, the Americas, or Europe.
Yeah. Brenda, as Europeans, I think we like to see ourselves as ahead of the curve when it comes to sustainable matters. The big question is that are we right?
I don't know whether that's always the case, especially now, because I definitely recognize the momentum that Elizabeth is talking about. And I think maybe we were ahead of the curve, but I think others are catching up really quickly across the globe.
What do you think of the tools Mr. Samson is promoting? He's talking about this taxonomy. He's talking about sustainable finance. Do you think he's on the right track?
I think it's an ambitious agenda. I think it's important to have an ambitious agenda because we need to get somewhere. And I think the tools are a very important step to make these things happen. In my future role as Chair of Invest Europe, I think what I would like to insist on is emphasize the importance being a bridge between the smaller fund managers, the bigger fund manager, the smaller LPs and the bigger LPs, so that everyone has the tools to be able to use sustainable finance, sustainability as a value add tool.
Samson in his clip is painting an image of your industry, of your private equity sector, as risk seekers, as companies who are willing to take a risk. Is that accurate, or is that wishful thinking? Are you not more looking for steady returns on investment?
I noticed that as well, Sander. I thought that was an interesting, like governments don't take risks. That is what the private equity venture capital does.
Yeah.
Obviously venture capital has a risk element in it, but it's a calculated risk, and the risk is on the market. If there is no market for what you are developing as a company where you invest into, it is not riskful. It is stupid.
Yeah. You also wanted to react on what might be a bit of naivety from Mr. Samson's side.
I think everything around ESG and sustainable finance can be transformed and can move away from just being a risk assessment tool to become a value add tool. And in that sense, the private equity industry, which is, yes, able to take some risk, is also well placed to calculate this risk through its very active ownership model.
How do you think about companies who do not align with the definitions as you stated in this taxonomy report? How can they still play a role?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think they have an absolutely essential role to play, because if you look at the broader economy at the moment, I think it's only like 2% that would be in line with the current definitions of the EU taxonomy. So, well, either you could say, well, that's not a lot, you need to change the definitions, but that's based on science and based on what needs to happen to reach this EU carbon neutral economy. So the other ways of looking at it is there's a lot of work to do.
Elizabeth, what kind of opportunities do the plans of the European Commission offer to you?
One is obviously investable areas. So with the the work that the EU is doing and the focus to build these markets, there are more investable areas for us in these critical sustainable topics. The other one, which Samson mentioned and then on sort of alluded to as well, is the opportunity for us as asset managers to partner with the portfolio companies to help them improve and transition them to a more sustainable business model or economy. And I think that's really critical and sometimes overlooked by people who don't really think about the private equity industry as thinking about the opportunities here.
I can imagine that in different parts of the world, this topic is viewed very differently.
We have seen differences around the world in terms of how people think about sustainability and ESG, but even within a single country, we'll see differences in how people think about this topic. And like I said, I think that's gotten in the way of a lot of progress.
Thank you.
May I ask a question?
Of course you can.
Elizabeth, do you think that one day we will have sustainable finance standards in the same way we have international accounting standards?
The answer is yes. I think we will get there. I mean, if you draw a parallel between this and the accounting world, that just in financial accounting world, and I am not an accountant, I don't know anything about it, but I do know that it was the bumpy road there too, and there's been a lot of work to come up with a common language.
René, what are you gonna do at SET to deliver on Mr. Samson's ambitions?
For us, it's a bread and butter, basically. So I turned this around, and I'm saying that we at SET, we are ready to deploy some of it, of the money that is available, into the directions of the technologies that are needed to make this ambition happen.
I'm wondering, because we're talking about this taxonomy, to what extent have investors been involved in the drafting of the Green Deal and the Sustainable Finance Program? I mean, how much conversation was there with the EC? Yeah.
So I would say, Invest Europe hasn't been involved in the actual drafting. At the end of the day, that's for the European Commission. But Invest Europe has been very, very active in trying to influence and shape the whole thinking process along the way.
Thank you. Elizabeth, quickly, with your worldview, what is the best way to get the private equity sector on board in a transition like this?
I would say it's really critical to focus on something I may have mentioned before, which is really the partnership up and down the value chain, the partnership between limited partners and general partners and the portfolio companies and the portfolio companies and their stakeholders.
Yeah. Can I add something to that? Because I find this very interesting. If we want to make green, sustainable impact elements reality for our industry, I think it has to be combined also with our own remuneration as fund managers, asset managers, whatever.
Yeah, I think maybe to add to that last point, I think what we're building now with this taxonomy, these new disclosure regulations, is a basis, like basically a fundament for also the European Union to build in incentives for investors or companies to start investing more sustainable. And for me, private equity is one of the places where that can really happen, as you're so close, as an investor, relatively close to the company, and you have relatively large voice if you compare it to, for example, listed equity investments. So I think that's definitely a place where change can be made.
Great.
I think that point that we've all made on the active ownership of fund manager of their portfolio companies is just completely critical. But I think it's important not to look at this as a sort of a trade-off between, oh, you do ESG and impact or you do returns. They go together. They go
together, absolutely. Yeah. Oh yeah.
You're all on the same page, it seems. Thank you so much for all of this optimism. You've been very easy to manage, patiently awaiting each other's answers. So thank you for that. I want to thank you for your contribution, and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.